Welcome to Trailer Geeks and Teaser Gods. I'm your host, Corey Nathan. This is where we get to speak with the brilliant and creative people who make the greatest coming attractions, movie posters, and digital campaigns of all time. Truly of all time. That's what this series is about within Trailer Geeks and Teaser Gods. This program is brought to you by 2496 Sound and Music Design, the best sound design and music elements in the business. We are also brought to you by the Golden Trailer Awards and by Soundstripe, the best royalty-free music for video, ads, and film. So without further ado, enjoy this conversation, our continued tribute to Andy Kuehn. All right, so glad to be with you again for this tribute to Andy Kuehn, and it is awesome. It's so much fun having my top gun. How's that? My top gun, Benedict Coulter, along for the ride. How you doing, Benny?
Good, Corey. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. This is so much fun. And today we are joined by a Kaleidoscope alumni, the president of Darklight Pictures, Vincent Arcaro. Vince, it's so good to see you. How you doing?
I'm great, Corey. Thank you.
Thanks so much for doing this, man. So a lot of folks, you before we hit record, you were saying that Andy was so great at what he did that he influenced not just trailer producers and trailer editors, but folks who've gone on to other great careers in adjacent industries. Would you mind introducing yourself to our listeners and letting folks know what you've been up to the last, I don't know, year or two, or maybe it has been a little bit longer?
A little longer. I joined Kaleidoscope in 1976. In fact, I don't know whether you've talked with Marjorie Doppelt, but
She's coming on in a couple of days, so yeah, that'll be fun.
we started within a couple of days of one another. I started there like so many alumni of Kaleidoscope did as a messenger. I was there for about a year, and in addition to, and especially then in the late 70s and the 80s, in addition to making trailers and television spots, Kaleidoscope made a lot of featurettes, which were which before there were electronic press kits, EPKs, there was the featurette. And the featurette really was a documentary, sometimes lasting 20, 30, sometimes an hour, a documentary about a film being made. And the studios would give those to the networks as a filler when the movie of the week ran short. They would show it. And, worked out perfectly for everybody. So we made those films, and the guy who was sort of the in-house production guy, I guess it was early 77 when ILM had started in Van Nuys. He went to work for ILM. He left the company, he left Kaleidoscope, and I sort of got a baptism by fire. And I was the guy who put the crews together for did all the logistics. Basically, I was the production manager. It was, like I said, baptism by fire. That's what it was. Because when I first started doing it, I had no idea what I was doing. And I stayed at Kaleidoscope for about 15, maybe 18, I can't remember, 15 years, I think, and then went off and partnered with Caleb Deschanel. We formed Darklight, and then Caleb left the company not actually too long ago, 5 or 6 years ago. And I've been running Darklight since then. I like to call Darklight a boutique company because I don't take every job that comes down the pike. And in fact, now for me, the less the better. I like to work with people I know. I like to work with my friends, explore other adventures. So that's my sort of story in a nutshell. I was lucky enough to be at Kaleidoscope when there was a generation of, I guess you could call it that, of editor producers before Benedict, before Greg McClatchy, Tom Kennedy. This was the Sean Walsh's, the Paul Bijou's, Jim Doherty, these guys who were really a fantastic artists at the same time. And with all due respect, Benedict, like I've noticed with all these trailer editors, a real rogue of gallery of rogues. And frankly, that's one of the things, I think that made Andy. Andy had the perfect storm for creating movie advertising. He knew how to manage his creative staff. This is not in any particular order. And like I said, they all weren't, yes, sir, Mr. Kuehn, whatever I can do for you. They were renegades, but he knew how to deal with them. And although Andy was a great manager, you couldn't deal with them in the sort of traditional corporate way. If somebody was out of line on something, not to do with the process of making a trailer, but just bad behavior in the office, you had to deal with that in a way that wouldn't break anybody's spirit, because that's what they all had going for them, this incredible artistic spirit, which frankly, for me, a producer who brings people to the party, I've always been in awe of, but and I think this is like a well-known thing, that Andy had this philosophy of creating a sense of urgency, and that would draw in audiences. And if you look at the trailer for Jaws, if you look at the trailer for Alien, which I think Kaleidoscope had a piece of the action in, that's what they do. They give you this emotional involvement in it. They don't tell you the story. They don't tell you the story, but they intrigue you about the story. So, I mean, he had that, that was another thing, another part of this perfect storm. And in my mind, and I could be wrong about this, but Andy understood and loved the magic of the movie business. I mean, before Andy was Kaleidoscope, Andy worked at the only real source for movie trailers,
Oh,
National
National Screen
National
Service.
Screen Service, yeah. And then from there, he went into the promotion department of MGM and traveled around the world on the sets of these movies. Andy, being Andy, would utilize the unit publicists on these films that he was sent to promote in different ways. And he would utilize a unit publicist to introduce him to the celebrities. And he would get a rapport going with them that gave him a very interesting insight into the business, into the magic of making movies. And it also, Andy being Andy, pleased him to no end to be able to throw in craps with, to be with a movie star. He in Monte Carlo, he loved that, and that was another part of the storm. The the knowing how to sell the magic of the things, and he wasn't afraid. Andy wasn't afraid to make a good mistake, or he made sure he, and at the same time, I should say, he made sure that his editors weren't put off by making an error. Like anything was like, it was sort of a go for it attitude. So, I mean, all of those things got him to understand and got him, the elements to being this creative giant of all these things. It's more than I think it's more than marketing. Look, I know you've talked to a lot of marketing geniuses, Joel Wayne, who had his background in
Yeah, New
commercial
York. Yeah.
advertising. Steve Panama, who was brought up in the world of motion picture advertising. But Andy had these sort of other tentacles out there that made him special, and his work at MGM really primed him, for all of that. Andy went so far. Andy would put himself into those to learn about the movies. He would put himself in the situations. Like I said, he would use the unit publicists to get him in with movie stars. We were doing a featurette on a movie called The Eyes of Laura Mars that shot in New York, and it was a murder detective thing, a typical 70s thing. And the amazing thing for me about the film was a lot of the photography was done by the still photography because it was about the world of modeling by Helmut Newton. Anyway, Andy went to the set. He had already had a relationship through his relationship with Barbara Streisand with John Peters. And he went to John Peters and he said, listen, I'm here to do some behind the scenes filming, but I'm here early. And I know from seeing your shooting schedule, you're going to be doing some big gallery opening scenes. And if it's okay, I have my own tuxedo and my own dinner clothes. I would like to be an extra in those scenes. So for 3 days before any 16 millimeter behind the scenes shooting began, Andy was on the set being an extra, eating the extras lunch and listening and learning. He constantly did that.
That's great.
And all of those things, I think contribute to that. And at the same time, for me, who was totally into the production of things that we did, the producing of featurettes, he would he'd give me pointers, and he would explain to me that, as a producer, your most important asset is your black book, the names you have. And to this day, when I teach my class, I tell them, I'm not an editor. I'm not a director. I don't do that with commercials. I don't write commercials. I produce the commercials, and I may not know everything, but I certainly know the people who do. And that was a very valuable life lesson and career lesson that Andy, that Andy taught me, very early on, and how to develop a set sense. There's a way you need to be when you're on a set, and this little thing, shooting behind the scenes photography is never the camera. When you're shooting behind the scenes and an actor is doing a scene with the production cameras rolling and you're shooting behind that, it's not that camera or that lens that can interfere with an actor's work. It's that damn microphone, that shotgun microphone. That's the disturbing part. And but all of those things, not to affect eye lines, everything like that. All those things I learned from Andy.
This is great. Trailer Geeks and Teaser Gods is brought to you by Soundstripe. So if you're an editor, a producer, a creative exec, a music supervisor, or even a podcaster like me, if you're a content creator of all stripes, if you will, and you're looking for the perfect library of music and sound effects, check out Soundstripe. With over 10,000 high quality tracks, including music from Grammy winning artists, Soundstripe makes music licensing hassle free. Believe me, I've tried it. I've been on there, I've navigated around. It was really terrific. It was really easy to use. So, with a simple subscription, you get unlimited access to a vast catalog, downloadable stems for creative flexibility, and AI song editing to customize tracks effortlessly. Plus, their seamless integration with Premiere, which is what most of my editor friends are on, it means a smoother editing experience. If you're ready to level up your production game with properly licensed, high quality music and sound effects, head over to soundstripe.com/trailergeeks and save 10% with code trailergeeks. That's soundstripe.com/trailergeeks and code trailergeeks. Trailer Geeks and Teaser Gods is brought to you by the Golden Trailer Awards. For folks who are just starting to get plugged in, the GTAs is an unconventional ceremony that honors excellence in feature film trailers, teasers, and movie marketing. Or as some folks like to think of it, it's the award ceremony for the short attention span. We all just celebrated the 25th Golden Trailer Awards. So would that be the Silver Golden Trailer Awards? Either way, it was a terrific show. Monica and Evie do such a wonderful job putting it together. Tons of fun, so much awesome work across the board. And mostly, it was just great to be together as a community. So keep an eye out for a number of exciting developments over the next year. Just make sure to stay plugged in at goldentrailer.com for a ton of exciting developments. That's goldentrailer.com. So I have a lot of questions now, and I'm sure Benny,
Okay,
you do
great.
too. But one is just for folks that don't know. So Messenger, kind of like an Uber driver, but you have film canisters. No, I'm just kidding.
You're
But
not, you're not bad though.
no,
See,
I'm
the
just kidding.
going rate in 1976 for a messenger at Kaleidoscope was $100 a week.
Okay.
And it got a little bit better, but I don't think very much over the years. But that was the going rate. And, listen, this was way before the digital age. So everything was done on film. So the trailer would start, you'd get the assignment, and the first thing down the street, you'd have to go to a place called Ashfield Labs, where they made black and white dupes of and soundtrack, mag tracks of the movie. So the messenger would run down and pick that up. Then you bring those to Kaleidoscope, and the editors and writers would sit in this homemade screening room, and the messenger would run the movie.
Yeah.
Run the black and white movie, and it would get going. Then during the whole course of the production of the post-production, the production of the trailer, though, if you had a cut, you'd run the cut, picture and track to MGM, to Warner Brothers,
Yeah.
and
Do you remember the first time you met Andy?
oh yeah, I first met, I don't know if you've ever heard of Dan Davis, but Dan Davis was Andy's business partner
Okay.
in Kaleidoscope. Dan Davis took assignments from Andy when Andy was at MGM to go out and do these behind the scenes things. Eventually, they formed Kaleidoscope together. When I got out of college, I was in Washington, D.C., living in my parents' home and working in a restaurant on DuPont Circle, handling the entertainment. And I would go to work at 4 in the afternoon and be done probably usually 5 or 6 in the morning.
Wow.
So I had really time to see my parents, and I would have lunch frequently. My father was with the Washington Post. He and I would have lunch at the Palm in Washington, D.C. So one day he and I are having lunch there. The guy walks by the table. He knows my father. Hey, Joe, how you doing? No, no. This is my son, Vince. Oh, Vince, what do you do? Well, I'm working at the saloon, but what I really want to do is go to Hollywood. And he writes on a book of matches. That's how long ago it was. He writes on a book of matches, Dan Davis, Kaleidoscope Films. This guy, by the way, was the head of publicity for Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
He just recently passed away.
Oh,
And old. And I said, okay. So I came to Hollywood. After all my great contacts fell through, I finally picked it up, called, got a meeting with Dan Davis. I walked in Dan Davis's office, and I only tell you this because it's kind of humorous. I walk in Dan Davis's office, and there's a man sitting in a electric chair that has been modified to swivel, and his back is to me, and he swivels around. And he goes, so you know Alan Bloom? And I go, yeah, well, I met him, and he goes,
yeah.
okay. Well, okay, you can have a job. This is how long it took. You could have a job as a messenger. Go see Andy. And 10 steps down the hall was Andy's office. And I met him and I said, what a guy, this guy who looked like Omar Sharif. And I said, wow, this really is Hollywood. I've hit it. I was trying not to think of $100 a week or all the, shit work that I eventually came to know that I would be doing. But yeah, it was just like that. It was a very, finally, to get the job and to get into Andy's office. That's how I met him that way, right from his partner's office.
Who was the guy in the electric chair?
That was Dan
Oh, that
Davis.
was Dan.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
that
funny.
was Dan Davis, and
See,
another bizarre character.
so you started out as a messenger. How quickly did it take you to start doing other stuff, producing? And I'm sure there was a trajectory there, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, listen, I was lucky because this guy who put the productions together, called the crew, and was sort of like the production manager. I was lucky that he went to go work on Star Wars, to work at ILM, because that bumped me up. Now, at the same time, I was still doing messenger stuff a little bit, and I then, was hiring the messengers.
It's interesting because other shops developed that same kind of line where, you were a messenger, then you were the head messenger, then you were hiring the messengers, and then you were assisted. So it's funny, hearing guys like Rob and Steve Pollard, that's what
Yeah,
their
yeah,
trajectory was at Aspect years after you. Um,
sure.
so who were some of the we've talked to some of the other folks that were there, but who were some of the folks that you worked with closely during those early years?
Well, I mean, I hired as messengers, first and foremost, the esteemed Benedict Coulter, um, Mike Camp, Bob
Wow.
Harper, the late Rick Goldstein, Mike Greenfield.
Okay. I forgot that Greenfield started at Kaleidoscope.
Yeah, yeah.
That's funny.
Um, so a lot of people, and really, there was a time when I was like the head of the messengers, but really not going on many runs, just coordinating dispatches. I was the equipment manager because in those days, if there was 20 editors, there was 30 moviolas,
Yeah.
and they constantly needed maintenance, and there was a guy who did that. And when a featurette would come up, I was the guy who would call the crew, get the equipment to the set, and be the liaison between usually the unit publicist and and what we were doing. And the great thing about that position for me, and what was really instrumental in teaching me things, was that as I as Kaleidoscope grew, Kaleidoscope started doing more than featurettes. I mean, through Andy's relationship with Ray Stark, he had a very close relationship with Ray Stark. Ray would call him and say, I got to do a screen test. Can you set it up for me in your office? And we do that. Quick stuff like that. Andy's old friend, Mort Engelberg, who was a unit publicist. Benedict, remember we had dinner with him at Shapiro's birthday?
Yeah, yeah.
And he sadly has passed, but Mort Engelberg was a unit publicist, became a producer for Ray Stark, produced the movie Smokey and the Bandit.
Oh, wow.
And because of Andy's relationship, he got Kaleidoscope to do the main title backgrounds for the movie. Now, instead of just doing 16 millimeter stuff, we were shooting full screen, a semi driving through the hills of Ojai and stuff for the main title the title backgrounds. We had a close relation. Andy had a close relationship with Joe Himes at Warner Brothers. And when Willie Nelson did a picture for Warner Brothers, Honeysuckle Rose, Jerry Schatzberg, Joe got us to go down there and do a featurette in Austin. We met Jerry Schatzberg, the director of the picture, who directed Panic in Needle Park, and he liked our work and said, we are filming Willie Nelson's picnic. Well, Willie Nelson is having a picnic that he has every year in Austin, Texas. And Warner's, we're not starting production yet, but would you bring a couple of crews down to film the picnic? And, we'll cut that into the movie. So now we were doing second unit work.
Wow.
And so we did a lot of, as I grew, the Kaleidoscope's work in production grew.
That's great. And Andy supported all that. He seemed to have a vision for that and champion people when they were pursuing these, like doing opening title sequences. That wasn't, I could see a lot of folks, if they get in a groove with trailers in this instance, they would partner with a company. We were talking about R. Greenberg back then on the
Sure.
Alien, right? But not a lot of guys would say, oh, well, that's a business. Let's get into that business. So that's really, it sounds like that he really championed you getting into all that.
Yeah, and I was, I keep saying this, but like I said before early on, baptism by fire,
Yeah. Yeah.
I learned it as we went.
Did you
And it was great.
Did you stay in touch with Andy after you went off and started Darklight?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Andy and I and Andy and my family
Oh,
were
that's
very
nice.
close we're all very close.
Trailer Geeks and Teaser Gods is brought to you by 2496 Sound and Music. 2496 Sound and Music has been publishing music and sound design in Hollywood for over 2 decades. While most traditional libraries started with music first, 2496 started from the ground up, creating killer sound design elements for trailers and film campaigns. Then they started building a music catalog which matches the sound design catalog perfectly, creating a powerful blend of sound, music, and emotion. Their founder, Lenny Jones, who's a pal of mine, really good guy, he is a motion picture and television sound editor with credits on top shows including Ancient Aliens and Unsolved Mysteries. 2496's sound design can be heard on current trailer campaigns, including many of the summer's box office hits. 2496's composers and sound designers hail from all over the globe, giving their clients not just 24/7 service, but an international style that will appeal to a global audience. They excel at rapid customizations and creative revisions, minimizing delays in your creative process. If you're looking for the sound of the next for your next trailer campaign, check out 2496 Sound and Music at 2496sfx.com. That's the numbers 2496 and SFX, like sound effects. That's 2496sfx.com. It's been over 20 years. I don't know if you realize it's been a while. What do you miss most about him?
I miss having Andy and I and my wife Jan would have dinner together once a month, and I miss the stories, and I miss Andy's stories because he could go on with these stories, especially these showbiz stories.
Yeah.
But also, Andy was truly interested in what I was doing. He was interested in what I was doing. He was interested. My wife is a retired hairdresser, makeup artist. He was interested in who you did Jonathan Winters. What was he like? Yeah, that's what I miss. I miss the sort of big brother slash father figure that Andy was in my life. I mean, there were times in my history that my father and Andy were together. We all had dinner together. And, it was like larger than life personified because my father was that as well,
Yeah.
in a different business. But
It sounds like Andy was Andy. He didn't have kids, did he?
no, he had no
No,
choice.
but he. It sounds like he treated it like the Kaleidoscope guys and women were his kids.
Without question.
That's great.
Well, without question. When I turned 40, quite a long time ago, my wife wanted to give me a surprise party, and she mentioned it to Andy, and Andy said, "Well, you'll do it at my house."
Oh, that's great.
And they had that party at Andy's house on Hollywood Boulevard, and
That's great. For those who are just listening and not watching, Benny has been nodding and smiling along and laughing. He's on mute. But Benny, now you get to ask the questions. What questions do you have for Vince?
First of all, it was really it's been fascinating to hear everybody's perspective because every single person that we've talked to has a different perspective of Andy, but they all have the same feeling about him, how wonderful and how supportive he was and how he championed all of us. And I have to say that Vince is very humble about his contribution to Kaleidoscope because his contribution was really huge. I was a kid when I walked down that hallway in my wool suit and cowboy boots to interview for, for a job as messenger at Kaleidoscope.
I didn't know about the wool suit part of it.
Yeah. And I walked down to the end of the hallway, and there was Vince and Jeff Smith. And Vince was ahead of the messengers, and he was doing the hiring. And, what I wanted to ask you, Vince, is you were given that confidence by Andy because you were basically the gatekeeper. How did you decide when you met messengers? Yeah, I think this kid's all right. Because I've done it when I had Trail Park where I actually interviewed the kids and say, this kid's not right. Well, how did you decide that? What made you think, okay, this is probably a good prospect? Because at the time I knew nothing about editing.
And I would talk to the people who would come in, men and women, and I didn't care what degrees they had in school or if they had been to film school. They needed to understand, and I've done this with hiring all people my whole career now, that you're starting at the bottom. And if you did go to film school, you haven't learned about film yet. The way you learn about film is to be out there, is to go into the studio, to drop off film. You talk to a guy, an old timer who was at 20th Century Fox, Ben Fuglesby, who, if you didn't get out fast enough, you drop something off to him. If you didn't get out fast enough, he would give you the history of motion pictures, and you like be pleading to, run away. There was a guy I used to deliver film to this is in the 76, on Lancashire across from Universal Studios before the Metro and all that was there. There were a bank of apartments that Universal had bought.
Yeah, I
And
remember that.
in that apartment was an office, and it was the office of a guy named Bruce Hanrahan.
Yes.
And Benedict, and he did the finishing on Universal pieces, and I would deliver to him, and he and I would talk. Oddly enough, about 10 years ago, I walk into my church over here on Moore Park, St. Charles Church, and one of the lay helpers is Bruce Hanrahan.
Wow.
And I later said to the priest, I said, I used to deliver film to this guy, and now we've sort of rekindled our friendship. So we get back to your question, Benedict. I wouldn't care how much they knew. I wanted to make sure they knew that this was the bottom of the rung, and the only way you're going to get ahead is to put yourself into positions to get you ahead. I mean, there was one person who came in who had a master's degree in film from NYU. And, he said to me, well, I'll take the job, and but I don't think I'll be doing it for very long because I've got a master's degree. And I was really against hiring him, and for some reason he was hired, but it didn't work out. I mean, it didn't work out. No, you had to. That's what you had to know that it was the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, and I remember, Corey, Vince was very intimidating. He kind of look at you, and he was playing with his beard, and he's, let me ask you, and I didn't know if I got the job. I thought, okay, well, but it's really, Vince was a very important part of the company because he was the gatekeeper to a lot of us who eventually moved up and, went on to have pretty good careers.
So, Vince, what questions do you have for Benny?
Listen, I know most everything. I probably know too much about Benedict. That's Kaleidoscope. But what impresses me about Benedict is his work since Kaleidoscope. And look, he was Benedict had two things going for him. First of all, he was a brilliant film editor, trailer editor. Okay. But not only that, and not all the brilliant editors could do this. Benedict had a way of bonding with the filmmakers. And that is a very, very, very precarious path to take because the people you work for, if you did it in the wrong way, would, and I've heard, not Andy, but I've heard other people who work with Andy on the administrative part say, don't talk to the filmmakers. I'll talk to the filmmaker.
Yeah.
And Benedict was able to do that without roughing the waters at all. And the filmmakers, all these filmmakers held a lot of respect, and he worked with them at Kaleidoscope and then after Kaleidoscope, and that always amazed me. But what really amazes me is Benedict's work that he's been doing that I don't know a great deal about, but his, Benedict writing children's books
That's
and that
yeah.
kind of thing, and how do you make that transition? And how do you, and you're still working in the movie advertising business,
Oh
correct?
yes. Oh yes.
Right. So how do you make that transition? I mean, I see how I went from producing television commercials to teaching television production, commercial production, but I don't, that was interesting. So how do you make that transition?
After we sold Trailer Park, I had some time, although I was still working independently with filmmakers. And my wife and I had talked about doing, when our kids were small, there was a DVDs called Baby Einstein. They were kind of electronic babysitters. And my wife said to me, we should do that. You're very good at putting these things together. And eventually, so I had a little time and we started putting these pieces together, and I became an Apple developer and we started the company. And it just grew and started growing, growing, growing with an app in the App Store. And then at some point, she said to me, "You remember when we were kids, we used to listen to children's books on cassette?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "We should try to get some authors to maybe let us do their books." And I approached them and I couldn't get any response. So I wrote one and I wrote another one. I wrote one. Vince, it's kind of like all of a sudden I discovered something else that I really enjoy doing. And I was sitting looking at a blank piece of paper and coming up with a story with an inspiring end in the end. And, before I knew it, I had written 30 children's books. And so I run this company, which is now, the app is over 100 countries around the world. I'm writing another book, my 31st book right now. I'm doing the thing. And it's just basically to answer your question, it's just another thing that really tickles me and makes me really happy, and I do that from 5 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock, and then 10 o'clock, I start working with my other company, Rebel, and continue doing the motion picture advertising, which I love doing. So, my sister's husband was a very famous photographer, and we just lost him a couple of years ago. He was my inspiration. He was shooting in his mid to late 80s,
Mm.
and I had conversation with him, said, "How come why are you still shooting it?" He said to me, "Because I love doing it." And I feel the same way. I just discovered out of nowhere another passion. So that's how I got to do that too.
This is great.
Yeah,
Uh,
that is great. That is great. And Benedict's brother-in-law, first of all, he was at every single event that there ever was, the ASC Awards, the Directors Guild Awards, everything. And not only was he there, but he constantly had a little camera with him, some very special little camera that I don't know what it was. But I mean, I went to see one night Andy Garcia's band at the Geffen Theater, and Douglas was there. And afterwards, I'm talking to this mambo dancer, Willie Marquez, and I hear, and Douglas is over there
that's
shooting
great.
pictures of us, like he always had a camera in his hand and he was always shooting. And that is inspirational. And
Yeah, and
it
that's
was
exactly what Andy did for Vince and I. These
exactly.
incredibly strong personalities that had so much impact in all of our lives.
Well, I have one more question. This is so terrific. It really colors in some of the other stories that we've heard and a lot of the background that we've been learning from everybody else. Once this might put you a little bit on the spot. What is your favorite campaign or trailer that you worked on, either you worked on or that was worked on during your time at Kaleidoscope?
There's several for a lot of different reasons. The taxi driver
Oh yeah,
embedded in my mind. And most of all, because the editor on that, a guy named Sean Walsh, who I mentioned earlier, would play his moviola at its highest setting. And for months, all you would hear in the hallways are, "You talking to me? Talking to me? I'm the only one here. You talking to me?" All right. So there was that. Of course, there was the Jaws campaign that sort of dared you to be afraid.
Yeah.
Um, I think for the work that I did, we made a 1-hour television special that the genius Ray Stark had sold to PBS. So, I mean, he sold it to PBS, and then they ran it on the making of the movie Annie.
Oh.
And first of all, think about this, if you will, for a second. He sold it to Ray Stark. Ray Stark sold it to PBS. So PBS paid him for this. All right. Then PBS aired an hour special multiple times on the making of Ray Stark's movie, Annie. It's really publicity genius.
Wow.
Let me tell you, John Huston directed the picture.
Yeah.
Margaret Booth edited the picture. This is the team who did the Red Badge of Courage, for Christ's sake. They shot in LA, but they shot in New Jersey. They shot big, beautiful sets, Albert, Finney. That was just incredible. And what a lesson being around these people. I mean, being in their midst, sitting while people interviewed them. It was quite incredible. And I also was blown away by, we did a featurette. Kaleidoscope didn't do it. Mike Shapiro did it. Saraband, his company then. Yeah. And on All That Jazz.
Oh yeah, that was a great one.
And
Yeah.
I got to meet, all of the Bob Fosse and
Wow.
I forget the woman who's in it now, but that was quite an incredible journey. These things, and I'll tell you, like I was saying about telling people I was hiring at entry level positions that you're going to learn about the film business by being around the film business. Being on the set of a motion picture for days on end and watching them work and looking what the gaffer does and looking what his electricians do, and then no film school can teach you this.
What's interesting is being around it. You mentioned Ray Stark a couple times, and I pulled up his, because I've heard the name, but I didn't realize West Side Story, The Misfits, Night of the Iguana, Funny Girl, Goodbye Girl, The Toy, Annie, like you mentioned, but also the filmmakers Sidney Pollack, John Huston, 11 with Neil Simon alone. You're among people, and you're among I don't know. I don't know if it tickles you as much as it tickles me, but just you're kind of connected to history in a way.
Totally. I mean, after Andy, well, no, it wasn't after Andy passed. He was alive. Andy gave me a couple of books. I don't even remember what they were. And I opened one book a year later, looked through it, and a note fell out of it. And it was a note from Ray Stark, a personal note. I
Wow.
have my stuff, a personal note from Ray Stark to Andy, thanking him for something he helped him with. But yeah, and those are the things, those are the things about Andy and his connections with these people. And then me just sort of riding those tailcoats and being able to be on the set, to watching John Huston.
Yeah. Wow. Oh man.
John Huston turned one day and said to Albert Finney, he said, "Listen," he said, "I've got 10 kids, the orphans, and a dog, little orphan Annie's dog." He said, "And when you're in a scene with them, when they get it right, that's the take we're using. You know, I mean, nobody can teach. And I said, wow, that's right.
That's great.
You know, so
Well,
yeah.
Vince, this has been really terrific. I'm so grateful that you came in and shared some of your memories and insights. I knew it would be gold, man. So thanks for doing it.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
Benny, it's great to see you. This has been so much
Hey,
fun. I can't tell you what a great idea this has been. It's been the highlight of my summer so far. Thank you so much for listening. As always, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It really does help us in the rankings so more folks can learn about these great stories, how the modern trailer industry started, and some of the stories behind some of the greatest trailers of all time. It really does. It's really wonderful to hear some folks and how so many folks have engaged in the conversation and learned about our industry and learned about some of these great campaigns. Follow us on all the socials. I'm really easy to find. I'm at Corey S. Nathan, at Corey, S as in Sam, Nathan. That's at Corey S. Nathan. And check out our awesome sponsors, 2496 Sound and Music Design, the Golden Trailer Awards, and Soundstripe. Really grateful to all those folks for helping us keep the lights on. Thank you for joining us. Now go do some inspired work.